you need to mute yourselves if you're not already muted, because I'll do the chanting and got to say got it, not leave meeting, that wouldn't be good. And that will be the dedication of offerings. You have to trust that I've got a Buddha Rupa in front of me, and I'll be bowing to that. And then I'll lead you into the 3 refuges and 5 precepts. Then I'll introduce a meditation to you, and then give a short reflection and invite you to ask some questions. So you can, if you wish, you can put your questions into chat if you address them to me, or to all, if you want everyone to see. Everyone sees the question, I don't have to read it out, but if you want to just send it to me, I can do, that's okay. And then if you eventually, we might run out of chat questions, and I'll invite you to unmute and then ask questions unmuted. So that's the plan. And I'll begin by chanting those the dedication of offerings. To the Blessed One, the Lord who fully attained perfect enlightenment, to the teaching which he expounded so well, and to the Blessed One's disciples who have practiced well, to these the Buddha, the Dhamma and the Sangha, we render with offerings our rightful homage. It is well for us that the Blessed One, having attained liberation, still had compassion for later generations. May these simple offerings be accepted for our long-lasting benefit and for the happiness it gives us. The Lord, the perfectly enlightened and Blessed One, I render homage to the Buddha, the Blessed One. The teachings so completely explained by him, I bow to the Dhamma. The Blessed One's disciples who have practiced well, I bow to the Sangha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Dhammaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Sanghaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Dutiyampi Buddhaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Dutiyampi Dhammaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Dutiyampi Sanghaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi. Tatiyampi Buddhaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Dhammaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi, Tatiyampi sangham saranam gacchami. Panatipata veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from taking the life of any living creature. Adinadana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from taking that which is not given. Kame sumichachara veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from sexual misconduct. Musavada veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from lying. Suramariyamajjapamadhatana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from consuming intoxicating drink and drugs which lead to carelessness. Imani pancha sikkhabadani silena sagating yanti silena bhogasampada silena nibbatiং yanti tasma silang visuddhaye. These are the 5 precepts. Virtue is the source of happiness. Virtue is the source of true wealth. Virtue is the source of peacefulness. Therefore let virtue be purified. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. So, begin by making yourselves comfortable. In my case, I'm going to wrap a blanket around myself. Taking a deep breath, breathing out, a long breath. It's a good way to begin, doing that a couple of times. Calming the body and mind on the out-breath. It's natural to bring a restless tension with you, which you become aware of when you bring your attention into the body. You might find it helpful to do what we call body sweeping, that initial kind of attention in the body, sweeping from the top of the head to the soles of the feet and back up again. Or just more generalized awareness of tension as we notice wherever it is. But it's helpful to pay deliberate attention to the body, because it's At first we have to do it deliberately. To apply the mind, to direct the mind in that way. This is just for calming down, just for noticing and calming down. We're not insisting that the body must be calm. Noticing is enough. But where we notice tension, we can give permission for the muscles to relax. And by bringing our attention into the body, then the mind calms down. By simply applying the mind to one object, that sensation that we've noticed, wherever that is, that's the object of our attention. So the mind doesn't get carried away with its mental content. It begins to calm down. Instead of the thoughts being our object, we take the body as an object, some aspect of the body. Can be deliberately focused on a particular sensation, or it might be fine for you to notice the body as a whole, just that sense of upright posture, the point of balance. Whatever object is most suitable, perhaps the breath entering the nostril and breathing in and breathing out may be a suitable object for you. The object doesn't matter, it's the calming result of focusing the mind that matters. As we calm the mind becomes like a mirror, reflecting back our experience. The mind itself reflects back on itself. We notice our experience. So our calm mind just becomes like a reflective mirror. We start to notice whatever physical or mental activity there is. One of the qualities of the mirror of the mind is it doesn't have an opinion. A mirror doesn't have an opinion, it just reflects back what there is. So we just notice the way it is without judging, without trying to make anything out of it. Or if we see that that's what we're trying to do, trying to make it into something, we notice that. So one of the things we notice is our compulsive habits, whatever they are. Trying to do this, trying to get that, to escape from this, to sort this out, to deal with that. Whatever arises in the mind, we just observe it, noticing it for what it is. Not judging it, just letting it be, just accepting it as it is. When we notice something, we notice it as it is. We don't claim it as our own. So if we notice doubt, that's doubt. It's not me being confused and doubtful, but simply this is doubt. This is what doubt is like. It feels like this. This is the experience of not being sure about things, something. Not being sure if I'm doing the right thing, if I'm understanding correctly. It feels like this. The mind can say, oh, but no, but I really am doubting. I'm really confused. But we don't believe it in those terms. We can't own it. We can't own the doubt. It's not ours. It's just the human condition. Everyone knows what doubt is. It's the same for everyone. It's not ours. We experience restlessness. How can we say it's ours when the whole world's experiencing restlessness? It's the same for everyone. Or sleepiness. How can we say it's ours? It's the human condition that we're experiencing. But we have the opportunity to know it from direct experience. Not because somebody tells us what it's like, but because we can experience it for ourselves. Perhaps we experience grasping, the grasping mind, wanting it to be like this, not wanting it to be like that. Instead of believing and buying into that, we can notice it. Like, wanting feels like this. That's desire. Aversion feels like this. We become curious about our experience rather than burdened through taking it personally. Curious about how it arises and ceases, comes and goes, constantly changing. We're never quite sure what it is really happening. We say, this is my experience, but what is that really? Not being sure is the overriding experience for me. Not sure. How does it feel? Not sure. feels like this, but I'm not quite sure because it's continually changing. Even the experience of not knowing can be completely known. It feels like this. It's like this, not to know. In this way, everything comes to be known, to be understood, just like this. But it's not through grasping and that we understand, but through letting go. Not by trying to understand, but by being willing to trust that simply noticing is enough, and that the truth will come to us. As we come towards the end of our meditation, we can reflect on what a kindness it is to accept oneself, to accept ourselves as we are, is the greatest kindness. It's an act of self-compassion, not to judge, to be self-critical. This is a very beautiful state of mind. To whatever extent that we experience that, it's a very joyful experience. And that acceptance is a feature of loving kindness, metta. So we can extend that to the world, to all beings in the world, wishing them well, willingness to accept them also. It's an offering of acceptance, is the greatest compassion that we can offer other people. And so we can extend that in all directions, above, below, and all around, without any obstruction. Ding. 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 It's a curious thing, this statement that mindfulness is enough. You could, it's not exactly what the Buddha said, but it's not exactly what the Buddha said, but in the Satipatthana Sutta, he said, sometimes it's translated as the only way, or the one way. Eka means one, and so a way to enlightenment. So mindfulness the only way sounds a bit of a grand statement, and not it's like that is if that's the only way, then what about all these other religions? And it sounds like you might be putting everything else down. It's curious. Or does it mean that it's one way? Because Eka means one. So is it the only way, or is it just one way? But whether or not it's one amongst many, it's the Buddha's way. The Buddha's offering, his teaching within the Buddha's experience. It was the one way that he taught to bring an end to suffering. And so if mindfulness is enough, then, and I'm just this is my way to reflect, I'm just offering this as a reflection. And this is, sometimes people say, oh, how do you reflect? Well, this is how you do it. So I just bring this question up. If mindfulness is everything, if that's all it takes, that's quite a kind of deep and profound statement, isn't it? What does that mean? What on earth are you talking about? Because does that mean if mindfulness is enough, we don't need to become wise? Then we don't have to try to become wise, because mindfulness it's enough just to be mindful. Then all of this teaching is almost like not required. Why bother with all this teaching if mindfulness is enough? And so when I reflect on this, then it sounds counterintuitive. It doesn't seem to make sense, and that's one of the wonders of reflecting. This method, this practice of reflecting. You take a theme which perhaps rationally doesn't make sense, and you hold it up and you think, well, if mindfulness is enough, how can that be? And so you reflect with a sense of wonder. It's like, oh, how could this be? How's that possible? What on earth could that be like? And the only way you can understand is by cultivating mindfulness, isn't it? That's the only way. There's only one way to understand. You have to be mindful, cultivate mindfulness, and experiment with it. So what kind of mindfulness would that be like if it was that much, that it was the only way? How could that be? What is this mindfulness? What is mindfulness then, if that's all it takes? So we're left with that question: what is mindfulness, which is really the important question. It's not, we've really challenged then, aren't we, to consider what this is. Of course, mindfulness is an experience, isn't it? It's not a thing. It's not a thing like a thing you can name and look up in Wikipedia and read about it and say that's what mindfulness is, because it's an experience, something you have to experience. So we can't reflect through looking it up in Google. We have to reflect by cultivating it, developing it. So we bring mindfulness, cause mindfulness to arise, and think, well, what is this mindfulness that I need to cultivate in order to understand what the Buddha meant when he said this is the only way? What would that mindfulness be like? What would it be like to experience that? So as we do that, so it's a challenge, isn't it? It's an experience. So I bring that to my mind, and I feel the body aligning. I think when I experience mindfulness, the body comes into alignment. And I know I've heard Amaravati talk about this, that when we bring mindfulness to the body, it naturally assumes an upright posture. It's as though with that quality of mindfulness, there's a self-balancing, or there's an alignment that happens in the body simply through awareness. Well, he said that, but it's something to be experienced. Something you can't believe. It's not for believing, but for experiencing. So have to bring our mindfulness, attention to the body, and trust, watch, observe. Out of curiosity, what happens to the body when I do that? Do I get that feeling, that sense of the body coming into alignment? The body assuming a natural upright, relaxed posture. It might not happen, but the suggestion there is that that's the default position, that the body in alignment is the natural state. Of course, because of all sorts of physical problems we've accumulated over our lifetime, it may not be anywhere near that, and lots of bad habits we might have accumulated in posture, but that there is that a possibility that the body can assume that natural upright posture as a natural relaxed state. And I've found that through practice. It was quite interesting because I went one retreat, one 10-day retreat. I had a lot of pain in my shoulders. Well, actually, I didn't so much have a lot of pain in my shoulders at first, but when I brought my head back and tucked in the chin and brought the shoulders back and assumed the posture that the teacher said was an upright posture, it felt so weird and strange. It felt so odd because I was so used to having my head forward and my shoulders bent forward like this, and up, in fact, that when I brought them down and brought the neck back, tucked the chin in, I got a lot of pain in the shoulders, and that, lots of alarm bells were ringing, telling me this wasn't good, doing me any good, and I'm never going to be able to get through the retreat like this, and I'll have to leave. The mind gets these thoughts, but by trusting that this was beneficial, that this was the right posture, I persevered, And gradually the pain went away, but it took about 3 days. And then after that, I never looked back, if you like. I recognized the danger of having this posture that I'd got so used to, which had arisen from working perhaps at a computer or looking down as an accountant. Before the days of computers, just looking down at small numbers on a piece of paper. So that was years and years of accumulated bad posture that I was able to shake off, really, in 3 days. It was very painful, but it was an amazingly beneficial result. So it takes confidence. But that was the confidence I had. And so the confidence to simply practice awareness. I wasn't trying to put the posture right or trying to fix that problem, but simply trusting in awareness that that was the natural posture. And that is a natural posture for me now. And so that's true of the body. So then it's possibly true of the mind. So how would it be to assume the mind in its natural state to be a state of the end of suffering? How could it be? Surely that must be it. When the mind's in its natural state, that must be the end of suffering, isn't it? We think that when the mind is in its natural state, we'll be completely consumed with greed, hatred, and delusion, because everything will go wild. We won't have anything under control. But actually, surely that's not the case. The natural state of the mind must be at ease, a state of ease and calm, like the natural state of the body, a natural, upright, balanced state. So the mind must be in a natural, balanced state. Its nature must be that. So then all this effort that we're putting in to control the mind, maybe that's wrong. Maybe we're missing the point because we're trying too hard. And if we just let the mind go, like a pendulum, it will gradually come to rest in its natural state. And how would that be? Well, perhaps this just awareness, natural awareness, just noticing is enough. Perhaps that's all it takes to notice. We don't have to fix anything. When we notice greed, hatred, and delusion, perhaps that's enough. We don't have to fix it. We don't have to get rid of anything. So that's counterintuitive. We think we would have to get rid of greed, and so we become self-critical when we feel that, when greed arises. We think there's something wrong. But when we understand greed, then greed's a natural, it's a human condition. I mean, it's what everything, the human, we're born into that. We're born into this greed, hatred, and delusion state. That's how it's called samsara. It's what happens. We want to suck the nipple to be fed. It's a natural condition. If we didn't do that, we wouldn't survive. And that impulsion to survive is so strong. So we're not, criticizing of the human condition. We're just understanding it. But we're not trying like this. Greed and hate is relatively easy, but delusion's far more difficult. You can let go of greed. You can surrender to aversion. But delusion, what do you do with that? you can't reason it out. You can't make it right. We can't think through the deluded mind with the deluded mind. We can't. It's not possible. The deluded mind can't solve the problem of delusion, but we can understand it with mindfulness. And when we see it, like holding up the mirror, then what we see, what's reflected back is this self-delusion, and we can see it for what it is. And when you understand, when you see clearly, just seeing is enough, because that's when you see, you understand. That's enough. You know what it is. There's nothing you need to fix, is what I mean. But you can't be fooled when you see it clearly. It's like when you see the conjurer's trick, you don't know how they're doing it, or how it works. You're not fooled, but you can still admire the conjurer. You think, wow, yeah, this is incredible, the way this works. But I'm not fooled by it. I don't believe it. Just because the way the mind works is incredible, I don't need to be taken in by it. So I offer that as a reflection. It's just possible that mindfulness is enough. That's my own reflection. I don't know. What happened to the questions? I don't get any. You don't feel you have to type. If you would like to unmute and ask a question, that's all right. But if you do want to type a question, that's good too. Hi, Gillick. Would you like to ask a question? Yeah. You have to unmute yourself. Does it not let you unmute? Okay. Wendy, you're going to have to give people permission to unmute. Oh well, if Wendy eventually might do that, can you send a message to Wendy and ask him if you can unmute? Thank you. If you do that. Oh. But you can still put your question in chat. So how does this mirror work? Like I described when developing concentration in meditation, it's like that's a way of clearing the mind. So by focusing, when you focus the mind, then it's like you're polishing the mirror, and this mirror reflects back. So we're able to see more clearly. Wanda is not responding.
He has been responding. You can hear me now.
Sorry,
Thank you, Wanda.
I've done that, Martin.
Oh, you have.
Well done, thank you.
Lovely. It was more a question, really, than a question. You were saying not being fooled by the conjurer. It was just an experience I had earlier. Somebody was telling me something about a friend that I didn't know. And I was getting rather upset. I could feel myself getting upset that this friend hadn't told me this, because I now had to admit to the third person that I didn't know. So I could feel this arising inside of me, you know? And I think that's what you mean by noticing, the reflection, by noticing what's happening inside of you. But that's still, even noticing it, it wouldn't go away. You know, I still wanted to react to it somehow. I found it very difficult to get rid of this feeling. It was just during meditation earlier that it was subsiding slightly, but I still want to react to it. So maybe you could sort of say a bit about that.
Yes, I'd love to say something about that. Yes, what you said was, when I noticed it, it still wouldn't go away. Do you know what I mean by, when I just say that to you, what does that mean?
Yes, I wanted it to go away, didn't I? So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's beautiful, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, you get that happens a lot, because what we don't like, we want to go away. And so many times I talk to people who say they've tried mindfulness, but it wouldn't go away. Yeah. I remember somebody who came to the monastery, they said they were suffering from anxiety. Would mindfulness help? I said yes. So they, at the end of the meditation workshop, and I spoke to them again, and after they'd been there for 2 hours, and I said, so how did you get on? They said it didn't go away, and they never came back. And it didn't, it wouldn't, would it? Because if you were anxious, you would discover your anxiety through mindfulness. It would become more apparent. It wouldn't go away, but you might start to understand it.
Yeah, and I think exactly the point that you raised earlier as well. When you notice it, and you blame yourself for doing it. Oh, this isn't going away. Why am I doing this? I shouldn't be doing this. You go down that road, and then you think, that's what you said earlier, kindness to yourself. It's just what happens, isn't it? So I found that very helpful, It just happened. So let it happen. It doesn't matter, does it? So it's just the ego trying to, rise up and make more trouble.
That's right, yeah. And that is the most important lesson we learn, is about the ego, is about the self, isn't it? Then when we say, Maya said, delusion is the most difficult thing to understand, but to see through or to penetrate, that's exactly where delusion stems from. That sense of self-identity, identifying with our experience and owning it and saying, I am an angry person. That is a real problem. Anger's not a problem. It's the I am an angry person. That's where the problem comes from. Yeah. That's where all the confusion lies. I've got a question from Simon. He says, could it be the case that sometimes a deluded viewpoint may only be dispelled by reflecting on the suffering it causes? By holding onto that view, or opinion. Or is impartial observing of the mind's opinions sometimes the most direct approach to dispelling delusion? Perhaps these are part of the same approach, I'm not sure. I'll just go back over that again. Could it be the case that sometimes a deluded viewpoint may only be dispelled by reflecting on the suffering it causes, by holding on to that view or opinion? Or is impartial observing of the mind's opinions sometimes the most direct approach to dispelling delusion? Well, that first possibility that you could reflect on the suffering it causes to hold on to that view or opinion, that's very helpful, because that's putting the thing first. The way I talk about this is it's like putting the thing before the relationship. So when you're holding a viewpoint, a strong view or opinion, then that's normally in relation, by talking to someone, you're talking to somebody else in discussion who has a different view. Otherwise, why would you be bothering to express yours? So this is suggesting that you're holding on to a particular viewpoint, a certain view. It might be a deluded viewpoint, and it could cause suffering because you've expressed it and somebody else has expressed some different view. I mean, actually, it says a deluded viewpoint. Well, actually, you could say any viewpoint's deluded, because if there's attachment to it, there's delusion there. So it doesn't matter how good, intelligent, even in accordance with Dhamma this appears to be. If it's a held view, then you've missed the point. You're holding on to something, and you'll create delusion out of it. So even you could say, okay, if I believe in a self, that's a deluded viewpoint. But if I believe there isn't a self, I'm also holding on to a deluded viewpoint. If I believe anything in relation to the self, it's a delusion. I'm creating a delusion out of a view about the self. So there's no good view about the self. If it's a view, it's a view. It's not about, really, you don't need to. There's no point really in going to which view is better than another. If there's views about the self, they're just views about the self. They don't have to be better or worse. They're just views, and you might as well just treat them all as deluded. And it's not about seeing through the self. It's not about holding a view about it. That's not the path. It's about letting go of views and opinions and holding onto positions in relation to this idea of self. It's cutting through that by relinquishing, by penetrating, seeing the conjurer's trick that's behind them. So could it be the case that sometimes a deluded viewpoint might be dispelled by reflecting on the suffering it causes? Well, all of those views create a huge amount of suffering, because none of them can be in accordance with reality. So whatever is connected to the grasping will cause suffering to arise. That's the teaching of the second noble truth. The cause of suffering is our holding on, grasping, attaching to views and opinions in this context. So they're bound to cause suffering. So yes, reflecting in that way But this is dukkha. Holding on to views is dukkha, cause of dukkha, is very helpful. I mean, what I think really is everything's possible. It's always possible I'm mistaken. So whatever view, opinion I might hold, I always remind myself I might be mistaken. And even though I hear somebody else expressing something, I think this is completely wrong. They're totally mistaken. This is completely. I always remember that too, that I might be mistaken. There's a context in which that what appears to be completely wrong view could be right. Given the context, is possible. So you become less judgmental about views. You start to let them go. And then, is it possible that the impartial observing of the mind's opinions could be the most direct approach? Well, that's mindfulness, isn't it? The impartial observation. So noticing a view for what it is definitely the path. If you know this is what it is, this is a view, this is an opinion, it's okay because you know what it is. It doesn't. You don't have to judge it to be superior or inferior, better or worse, equal, just as good as anybody else's. It doesn't have to be. It's just to know what it is. That's all it takes, really. If that's true, that if what the Buddha said is true, that's enough.
Hi, Martin.
Hi,
Martin.
Hi, John.
Hi. That's all very interesting, and I think it made me think that if pretty much all of the output of our minds are delusions, do we have to even go a stage further back and actually start to understand that there's no right or wrong in any matter whatsoever? And these are the things that we tend to hold on to too much, that we are right about something. So do we have to even go back further and actually drop the whole idea of right or wrong in anything?
I think we have to understand it in a right way, but in an ultimate truth, then there's no right or wrong. But in conventional truth, there's a right and a wrong. So if you, let's take a memory, and you remember this happened, for you that's right. Now somebody else was in the same room, they remember differently, and they say, no, that didn't happen, it was like this. This is what happened. Conventionally, we can say we're both right, because in our memory, that's how it was. So, but we don't have to argue with the other person. That's what I mean. The other person saw it differently. For them, like I remember a case where somebody said they were attacked by somebody verbally. They felt that they were attacked by somebody when they spoke to them, and I was in that same meeting, and I didn't perceive that what they said was like that. It was they were just expressing how they felt, but the other person felt attacked. Now, there's no point in me going to that person and saying, no, you weren't attacked, because they won't believe me, because that's how it felt to them. But I can sympathize with the guy who spoke, because I don't think he meant to attack. I don't think he meant that to happen. And that didn't sound like that to me. So by not taking sides and not holding onto anything, you might not be able to be successful, but you might be able to resolve. You probably won't. You probably won't be able to fix anything, but at least you can understand those two other ways of thinking and those two different understandings of what happened in the room. And your perception, and none of it's wrong. It's all true for the person who experienced it. There's no point in telling the person who felt attacked, no, you didn't feel that way, because that's what they felt. And you can't make it right for them. You can't say what didn't happen. What you can do is encourage them to let go. Yeah. So I think we have to be a bit careful to say there's nothing right or wrong, because there are, we need to make choices and we need to choose things, and sometimes we have to choose what we think is right, and sometimes we have to avoid something we think is wrong, and that's right. That's how it should be. But ultimately, we shouldn't. We're open to possibilities that we might be mistaken. So, okay, we think it's wrong, but it's always possible that we might be mistaken. But nevertheless, we think it's wrong, so we won't do it. But you get that in meditation. So that thought that arises, we think this is wrong. And we can push it away and never really understand what it is, what's happening. And so sometimes we have to deliberately allow the thing we think is wrong in, so we can understand it. Because otherwise we just beat it down all the time and keep pushing it away and never acknowledge. And that thought has a place. It wants to come into our consciousness, and we won't let it. So we have to allow the wrongness of it to come and manifest. It's not comfortable, and we don't like it. We don't want it to be this way, and we're frightened because we think it's who we are. But it isn't. It's just a thought. And when we can allow it to run its course, there's freedom there. We don't need to suppress it. We don't need to run away from it anymore. And then what happens is it doesn't bother coming back. But as long as we keep pushing it away, it keeps coming back, and we keep saying, no, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. And so we have to open up to everything.
I heard a monk, I think he was a Thai monk once, and he particularly liked the English phrase, the benefit of the doubt. And he did quite a sort of riff on this, the benefit of the doubt, that if we extend the benefit of the doubt to other people, to tricky situations, perhaps even to ourselves, it gives you that leeway, I think, that you're talking about, Martin, that what looked wrong actually might not be so wrong. So I thought that the benefit of the doubt often springs to my mind I try to think, to give things the benefit of the doubt. I think it's a generous spirited take on complexities.
Yes. I mean, let's say that person I was describing, they took it as though they'd been personally attacked. Now, there's no point in me going to them and saying that didn't happen. It wasn't like that. It felt like that to them. For them, it was real. If you can't begin a conversation by just telling them they were wrong, you've got to begin a conversation by accepting that that's how they felt, and then and not trying to deny it for them and saying that wasn't true, but or even to try and justify, to pretend that it is a way of, even when we try to justify and reason, it's as though we won't really admit that that's how they felt. We're still trying, we won't really admit it. So we have to really begin to accept. It's very hard to begin that conversation with people because to not judge them, because you can't really begin until you stop doing that. You have to begin from acceptance. And then when they trust you, that you really accept that's how they felt, then maybe you can begin to communicate. But yeah, we have to accept them. So there's no good going on telling them they were wrong. That can't be the beginning. But when we accept them, and maybe it's just possible that we can understand them, then we can perhaps get them to get a perspective on what they've experienced and let it go.
Yeah, I think quite often as well in a situation such as is being described there, we personalize it. It you know, it presses the wrong buttons in us, doesn't it? Maybe something going back to childhood. Whereas if you can turn that the other way and try to imagine, put yourself in the other person's shoes and try to think, well, they might be feeling this or they might be feeling that, then it diffuses it a little bit. At least I think that can help.
Yes.
To not personalize it.
It's not a good thing to go to people and tell them to let go. You think it might help, but it's not really helping, because you don't. It comes across as not acknowledging what they've experienced. To empathize or to be compassionate, we have to listen and not try and fix the problem for them.
Yeah, and quite often Buddhist people, I've noticed, say, well, it's only a question of your perception. It's really just a matter of your perception. And I think in those situations, that actually isn't very helpful.
No.
I mean, it's true, but it's not helpful.
Yes, I know we're full of good advice to fix other people's problems, aren't we? Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, that's good. I thought I might have missed a question, but I think it's all right. So we've got to the end, and thank you very much for joining me, and I hope it's been useful. I'll finish with the closing homage. The Lord, the perfectly enlightened and blessed one, I render homage to the Buddha, the Blessed One. The teaching so completely explained by him, I bow to the Dhamma. The Blessed One's disciples who have practiced well, I bow to the Sangha. Thank you, everyone.